This is the reason a surgeon earning $300,000 a year can end up broke, while a teacher earning $60,000 retires a millionaire. A PIMANT study from early 2024 found that 36% of people earning over $200,000 a year describe themselves as living paycheck to paycheck, and that number is not a typo. Ramsey Solutions surveyed over 10,000 millionaires and discovered that a third of them never pulled in six figures during a single working year. The 5 most common careers on that list were engineer, accountant, teacher, manager, and attorney. Something about the way most people think about money is fundamentally wrong. The assumption that earning more automatically means having more doesn't hold up, and the data suggests it barely matters at all. This video explains why, and by the time it's over, your definition of doing well financially will probably look very different. The words rich and wealthy get thrown around as if they mean the same thing, and they don't. Rich describes income, the money flowing in from your salary, your bonus, your paycheck, measuring your earning power right now. Wealthy describes net worth, your assets minus your liabilities, measuring what you've actually accumulated and what you own outright. Chris Rock captured the difference better than any economist during his 2004 special when he told the audience, Oprah is rich, Bill Gates is wealthy. If Bill Gates woke up tomorrow with Oprah's money, he'd jump out a window. A joke with a dead serious point behind it. Income works like a stream. Wealth works like a reservoir, and a big stream that empties out every month leaves you with nothing. Thomas Stanley spent decades studying affluent Americans for his book, The Millionaire Next Door, and found that income explained only about 30% of the variation in wealth. That means 70% of the gap between who ends up wealthy and who doesn't has almost nothing to do with their paycheck and everything to do with what they do after the money arrives. High earners going broke is a real phenomenon with a real name, and that name is lifestyle inflation. An academic concept called the hedonic treadmill sits behind it, coined by Brickman and Campbell in 1971. The idea is that your happiness baseline resets every time your circumstances improve. A raise comes in, you feel great, you upgrade your life to match the new income, and within a few months you feel exactly the same as before, except your expenses are now higher. Brickman went on to study 22 lottery winners in 1978 and found they were not significantly happier than a control group and that they actually reported less pleasure from ordinary daily activities than people who hadn't won anything. Spending pattern data confirms this. The Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Expenditure Survey for 2024 shows that the highest income quintile in the U.S. spends about $150,000 a year. The lowest quintile spends roughly $35,000, a 4.3 to 1 ratio. But here's the part that actually matters. Only 17.7% of spending among the highest earners went toward personal insurance and pensions, the category that builds a future, while the lowest earners directed just 2.1% there. Neither group keeps much of what comes in. And this pattern doesn't just show up in spreadsheets, it shows up in headlines. Mike Tyson pulled in at least $400 million during his career, a figure the New York Times confirmed. Bankruptcy came in 2003 with $23 million in debt, $13.4 million of it owed to the IRS alone. Among his expenses were Bengal tigers at $70,000 each, with another $125,000 a year just to care for them. MC Hammer brought in about $70 million over his career, including $33 million in 1991 alone. 5 years later, he filed for bankruptcy, carrying $13.7 million in debt, having spent $500,000 a month maintaining a 200-person entourage, 21 racehorses, and 2 helicopters. About $200 million flowed through Allen Iverson's hands between his NBA salary and endorsements. By 2012, during divorce proceedings, he couldn't cover a $900,000 jewelry bill. The only thing that saved him was a lifetime deal from a major shoe brand that included a $32 million trust locked until he turns 55. Athletes aren't the only ones. Nicolas Cage earned over $150 million between 1996 and 2011, with $40 million arriving in 2009 alone. Before that year ended, the IRS had filed a $6.3 million lien against him, and the spending trail included 15 houses, a private island, 4 yachts, and a dinosaur skull he later had to return to Mongolia. One quick note on a statistic you'll hear in a lot of videos like this. the claim that 70% of lottery winners go broke. The National Endowment for Financial Education publicly disowned that number in January 2018, stating it is not backed by their research and cannot be confirmed, and that it originated from a panel discussion in 2001 rather than an actual study. The individual cases of lottery winners losing everything are real and well documented, and they all point to the same conclusion. Income without financial behavior is just money passing through. Which brings us to one of the most useful distinctions in personal finance, the difference between assets and liabilities. Not in the accounting textbook sense, but in the practical sense of what each purchase is actually doing to your net worth over time. Robert Kiyosaki framed it simply in Rich Dad, Poor Dad. An asset puts money in my pocket, a liability takes money out of my pocket. Running the numbers on the two biggest purchases most people ever make tells the whole story. Start with a new car. According to a major automotive valuation guide, the average new vehicle loses about 20% of its value in the first year. Industry data covering 950,000 vehicles puts average 5-year depreciation at 41.8%. Luxury vehicles perform far worse, with one high-end Italian sedan shedding 64.5% over 5 years, and one premium electric SUV dropping 72.2%. As of the fourth quarter of 2025, the average monthly payment on a new car loan hit $767, a record high. More than 1 in 6 new car buyers now carries a payment over $1,000 a month. A major auto club's 2025 study found the total cost to own and operate a new vehicle averages $11,577 per year once you add fuel, insurance, maintenance, registration, financing, and depreciation together. You are making payments on something that loses value every single month. That is what a liability looks like in real life. Houses tell a different story, but not the one most people assume. Most Americans believe their home is their biggest asset, and on paper it usually is. But the actual cost structure tells a more complicated truth. A $400,000 mortgage at 7%, which is close to recent market rates, carries a monthly principal and interest payment of about $2,661. Over 30 years, the total paid reaches $958,036. That includes roughly $558,000 in interest alone, more than the original price of the house. The crossover point where more of your monthly payment goes to principal than interest typically doesn't arrive until around year 18 or 19 on a 30-year mortgage. During the first 5 years, roughly 81% of every payment goes straight to interest. Once you add property taxes, insurance, and the standard 1% maintenance rule, that $400,000 house realistically costs around $3,400 to $3,500 a month before utilities. None of that means homeownership is a bad idea. The 2022 Survey of Consumer Finances shows that median net housing value rose to $201,000, and equity does build over time. But the idea that a house functions as a pure asset the day you sign the paperwork misses the reality that for most of that first decade, you are mostly paying interest and carrying costs. You are renting the money. Cars and houses aren't the enemy here. The enemy is never doing the math. Most people look at the monthly payment and ask whether they can afford it, instead of asking what the purchase is actually costing them over its full lifespan. That question, what is this costing me over time, opens the door to what might be the most powerful concept in this entire video, the idea that wealth is measured in time. Buckminster Fuller put it plainly in 1981. Wealth is a person's ability to survive so many days forward. Not how much you earn and not what you own, but how long you can live without working. That one sentence contains the entire framework. Kiyosaki adopted the same definition in Rich Dad, Poor Dad when he wrote, "If I stopped working today, how long could I survive?" The data paints a grim picture when you apply that lens. The Federal Reserve's 2024 SHED survey, covering over 12,000 households, found that only 55% of Americans have a rainy day fund that could cover 3 months of expenses. 30% reported they could not cover 3 months by any means. A major financial outlet's 2026 report found that only 27% of Americans have 6 months or more in savings. 24% carry zero emergency savings. For nearly a quarter of the country, Wealth measured in time equals zero. Work stops and the clock runs out immediately. This isn't confined to low earners either. Only 30% of Americans could pay a $1,000 emergency from savings, and the Federal Reserve reported that only 63% could handle a $400 surprise expense entirely from cash. Morgan Housel captured this perfectly in The Psychology of Money. Wealth is hidden. It's income not spent. It's the nice cars not purchased, the diamonds not bought, the watches not worn. Wealth is what you don't see. And that's exactly why the teacher retires a millionaire while the surgeon sits broke. The teacher's wealth, measured in months of freedom, grew every year. The surgeon's income ran high, but their wealth measured in time might have been 30 days, maybe 60, maybe less. If income alone doesn't build wealth, every data set points to the same answer: ownership. Naval Ravikant framed it bluntly: you're not going to get rich renting out your time. You must own equity, a piece of a business, to gain your financial freedom. Federal Reserve distributional financial accounts confirm this. Among the top 0.1% of households, roughly 70% of financial wealth sits in equities, meaning corporate stock and business ownership, while real estate accounts for only about 9% of their total assets. The bottom 50% holds almost no stock. About 93% of all household stock market wealth belongs to the top 10%, and the bottom 50% owns roughly 1%. And here's the thing: you don't have to be a founder or a business owner to participate in ownership. The study of 10,000 millionaires found that 80% invested consistently through their company's retirement plan, 75% also invested outside of it, and not a single millionaire in the study cited single stock picking as a major wealth building factor. They bought in, stayed in, and let time do the work. The speed difference between paths is worth noting, though. Tom Corley studied 233 millionaires and found that entrepreneurs reached $1 million in an average of 12 years, while saver investors on regular W-2 salaries took 32 years. Same destination, very different timelines. Once ownership compounds long enough, the numbers become staggering. Housel pointed out that $84.2 billion of Warren Buffett's $84.5 billion net worth accumulated after his 50th birthday. That outcome had nothing to do with income and everything to do with time inside the market and the exponential curve of compounding. The lesson isn't to go start a company. Wealth gets built by owning things that grow, whether that's a business, a share of many businesses through the market, or property that appreciates over decades, and the longer you hold them, the more they compound. Now zoom all the way out. Everything covered so far: lifestyle inflation, assets versus liabilities, ownership, time, all of it scales across generations. A widely cited statistic claims that 70% of wealthy families lose their wealth by the second generation and 90% by the third, drawn from a study by Roy Williams and Vic Pricer and published in their 2003 book, Preparing Heirs. Wealth researcher James Grubman published a peer-reviewed critique of that number in 2022, arguing it traces back to a single 1980s study with thin methodology. The directional truth holds up, but the specific percentages deserve skepticism. Real families illustrate the pattern clearly. Cornelius Vanderbilt left roughly $100 million when he died in 1877, and his son William doubled it to $200 million by 1885. At a 1973 family reunion of 120 Vanderbilt descendants, not a single one qualified as a millionaire. Every Vanderbilt mansion in Manhattan had been demolished by 1947. Cornelius himself reportedly warned, "Any fool can make a fortune. It takes a man of brains to hold on to it." His own family proved the point. The Stroh Brewing Dynasty carried a valuation of about $700 million in 1988. They took on $500 million in debt to acquire a competitor when their company was worth only $100 million, sold what remained for $350 million in 1999, with most of it absorbed by creditors, and the family fund ran dry by 2008. Barbara Hutton, the Woolworth heiress, inherited somewhere between $42 and $50 million by age 21 in 1933, close to $1 billion in today's money. When she died in 1979, everything she had left added up to approximately $3,500. No trust restrictions had been placed on her access, and the full fortune had been available since she turned 21. Gone in a single lifetime. Contrast those outcomes with families that have maintained wealth for 5, 6, 7 generations. The Rockefellers established the first single-family office in the United States in 1882 and created irrevocable dynasty trusts. Heirs live on dividends under a strict rule of never touching the principal, and the family holds annual meetings with induction ceremonies at age 21, alongside financial literacy training that starts in childhood. That family's capital management operation today oversees more than $90 billion. The Mars family has governed itself with 5 written principles since the company's founding and has never gone public. Staying private removed the pressure to chase short-term returns and kept control within the family across multiple generations. What separates the Vanderbilts from the Rockefellers isn't luck, it's structure. The families that preserved wealth built systems, trusts, governance, education, and rules about access that made the wealth bigger than any single person's spending habits. And this connects to a reality that needs to be addressed directly. Generational wealth does not compound equally across demographics. The 2022 survey of consumer finances, the first to separate Asian households as their own category, shows median family net worth for white families at $284,310. For Black families, that number drops to $44,100, which works out to 15.5 cents on the dollar. For Hispanic families, the median sits at $62,120. The dollar gap is actually growing even as the ratio between groups shrinks. The raw dollar white-black wealth gap went from about $154,000 in 2016 to $240,000 in 2022. Black families are far less likely to receive any inheritance, and when they do, the amounts arrive smaller. Only about 30% of all U.S. households ever receive an inheritance at all, and the median amount without a trust sits at about $69,000. When we talk about compounding across generations, we have to be honest that the system has dramatically advantaged families who entered early and were allowed to participate fully. The playing field has never been level, and the data makes that clear. Cerulli Associates projects that $124 trillion in wealth will pass between generations through 2048. $105 trillion will go to heirs, and $18 trillion to charity, with most of it flowing from baby boomers. This is the largest intergenerational wealth transfer in recorded history. Every one of those families will face the same question, and everyone watching this should be asking it too. Am I building income or am I building wealth? Because those are not the same thing. Income is what you earn, wealth is what you keep. Income is what you spend, wealth is what compounds. Income buys a lifestyle, and wealth buys time. Once you see that distinction, you can't unsee it. Car payments look different, a mortgage looks different, even a raise looks different. The question stops being what can I afford now and becomes what is this doing to my future? That study of millionaires found the average millionaire spent 28 years saving and investing before crossing the $1 million mark. No windfall, no inheritance for 79% of them, and no extraordinary salary. Just time, consistency, and the decision to build a reservoir instead of widening the stream. This isn't a lecture about what to do with your money. The real question is just which one you're building, rich or wealthy. Rich is a paycheck, wealthy is a choice, and now you know the difference.